And he dropped this on my desk and said, "Here, learn this. We're going to use it." And I was just like, "Oh no, not software." I just wasn't really that interested in it.
Welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes. I am here today with Ed Dickens. Some of you may know Ed. He's been around the LabVIEW community for quite a while, long before I started around. Been to many of the old NI weeks. I think I've seen you wearing some old NI week t-shirts from way back
I've
when.
got a few old ones still, I think, in the bottom drawer of my dresser.
Yeah, so why don't you just tell us a little bit about, I guess let's start with how you got into LabVIEW and got into going to NI week and some stories around that, I think.
I got into LabVIEW quite accidentally, actually. I got hired at Distech in, I think it was 1999, as a contract technician. And I was put on site at one of our bigger customers working for one of their engineers. And about 6 months before I had started, he had bought several of the PXI systems and several copies of LabVIEW, but nobody had done anything with them. So a couple of days after I got there and got kind of settled in, he walked over and dropped this brick on my desk, and this was LabVIEW 6. I don't know if you've ever seen how LabVIEW 6 was delivered, but it was like this one square cubic foot box that
Really?
had actual printed manuals in it and a whole bunch of CDs.
Okay, yeah. Well, I started using like LabVIEW 2009, and they still sent a box of CDs with in the little binder. So yeah,
Oh, yeah, the little blue binders, yeah.
yeah.
But at the time, I was not a software person at all. I was a hardware engineering technician. And he dropped this on my desk and said, "Here, learn this. We're going to use it." And I was just like, "Oh no, not software." I just wasn't really that interested in it. But so I kind of started digging into it, and it looked fairly interesting. It was a completely different paradigm than text-based programming, which I really liked. Not the text-based programming, but the LabVIEW way. Just a lot easier for me to understand. I'd had basic programming in school, and just it didn't really interest me that much. But this, after I got into it a little bit more, I really got more interested. And, I started with a couple small projects, and they requested a few things that I could not figure out how to do. So I started poking around online looking for, some information. And I happened to um, find no, I can't remember the name of it. There's an old mailing list.
Info LabVIEW.
Info
It's not
LabVIEw,
Anna,
yes.
yeah.
I found the Info LabVIEW mailing list and got connected with that. And from there, got connected with a lot of other people who had been using LabVIEW, like Jim Kring and Michael Evialotis and that whole group. And so they helped me a lot, as well as some of the people internal to NI that getting these extra features figured out, and that I couldn't figure out. And so from there, it just kind of kept going. For the most part, at the beginning, I taught myself. I went through the self-paced classes. I talked the engineer I was working for into just ordering the class material so I could sit there and go through it. And I went through the basics and the intermediate classes, and eventually I found out about NI Week and convinced everybody that I needed to go to that. And in conjunction with, I think it was probably my first NI Week, I also signed up to go to one of the advanced LabVIEW classes that was going to be held the week after NI week. And so I did that, and that's where I met Nancy Hollenbeck at the time.
Yeah.
And so I got real fortunate in connecting, with a lot of the higher level users, real early on when I was starting. And so that gave me a really good boost. And I knew where to go to find information that I needed. And it just kind of all, ballooned from there. I eventually went to a couple more of the, higher level LabVIEW classes, kept going to NI week, learned more about RT, got into FPGA really early on when Compact Rio came out. I actually had a beta version of a Compact Rio chassis on my desk for a while. So that's where it all started.
Wow.
Very,
Yeah.
like I say, very reluctantly, but it has turned out, very, very good for me. I've made a really nice career out of it, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you've been doing it for quite a while. You're still at Distech, actually.
I'm still at Distech. I've been there 20, well, officially started in 2000
Oh,
after I was on contract for like 6 months. So I've been there 24 years now.
okay. Cool. Yeah, I thought you've been around a little bit longer than that. I started in like 2007, and by that time you were already kind of around and in with all the champions in that group.
Yeah,
I
like I
definitely,
say, just getting hooked up early with them really helped.
yeah, I do think there is something about that, about having other people to bounce ideas off of and talk about things with.
Yep.
So over the many years at Distech, what is can you tell me about your most interesting project?
That would probably have to be a laser project I worked on at the University of Nebraska
Oh,
with their physics department. This was a 1 petawatt laser,
that's
and yeah, it's a big laser. And their eventual goal was to, I think to attempt to simulate the conditions that are on the sun.
ooh,
And they had, I can't remember the exact configuration of this thing, but it had 5 or 6 smaller lasers that were all focused through, and this is going to sound like a, James Bond thing, but I think it was a ruby or titanium ruby liquid cooled crystal. And these 5 smaller beams would, then be focused into one large beam that fired into a target, which was this big stainless steel vacuum chamber that they would put something in there, and do experiments with, exactly what, I don't know. But my part of this was the data acquisition system. And this was a large PXI chassis. I think we had one of their 18 slot chassis. And I think we had 6 of the, S series simultaneously sampling PXI cards that could do, like a mega sample per second per channel. And because, things happen very quickly in that chamber. Each time they'd fire that, it would be a pulse of just, like femtoseconds or something like that. So capturing data and having everything synchronized, was pretty critical. That was a really fun project. And there was a little bit of control that went along with it as far as, they would inject different types of gases into the chamber to see what the effect was, or just because it was needed for that. And so the gas had to be injected in at precisely the right moment. And that was, controlled through some digital stuff that I did on an FPGA.
yeah, that sounds
So
pretty
that,
cool.
that 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 was pretty interesting. It was, and the whole thing was in a lab, um, near their football stadium, kind of underground, and you had to wear a clean suit and go in through an air curtain that would blow everything off of you, and you had to, hit hair coverings and everything. So it was an actual clean room that the whole setup was in.
Yeah, and imagine there's a lot of safety precautions around a laser that powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, Westinghouse
Yeah.
we had some lasers, and they were definitely there was a lot of like interlocks and all kinds of stuff to make sure that like nobody was in the room when it fired and all these things. So
Yeah, it was I was there for the first time they actually fired it, and it was kind of anticlimactic actually because it was just this little brief little flick basically, and it was done.
yeah,
Everything
well,
worked, and
pulse is so
so
small you probably wouldn't even see it.
yeah.
Cool. Um, and so one question that I like to ask people is, can you tell me about an experiment that you tried where things didn't turn out the way that you thought they would, and what you learned?
It was a vision application. First time I'd done a vision application actually. And what I learned is you have to know when to give up and try something different. And I think it's probably a somewhat common problem. An engineer gets something in his mind of how it's going to work and how to solve it. And you get stuck on that and you have to make it work. And it just wouldn't. And I just kept going around the same thing over and over for several days, maybe even a week or so after I got it all set up, and it just wouldn't work. And I finally decided I needed to scrap that whole idea and start over. Moreover, because as I was going through all that, I learned a lot more about how the vision tools actually worked, and eventually could see that there was a better solution than the one I was trying to make work. And the application itself was for this company that did hydraulics. And the line I was working on made these hydraulic slices. And, if you think of like on the back of a tow truck, they've got these manual controls with the levers on them that, they pull and push these levers and it makes the boom go up and down and in and out. It was that stack. So this is, really high pressure device. But the vision system was to look at the surface of this and make sure that all of the O-rings were properly installed and the correct O-rings were installed and they were different colors. Well, the surface of this thing was polished, mirror smooth. It was just
Mm.
shiny and it had oil on it.
Ah,
So getting the lighting right and getting, it to be able to take a picture to identify that all the correct O-rings were installed in all the correct places turned out to be fairly difficult. But yeah, I did eventually figure it out. And as far as I know, they're still using it today. And that was, wow, early 2000s, probably 2003, 2004.
yeah, back when I worked at Westinghouse, they were inspecting fuel rods. I didn't work on this project, a buddy of mine did, but they were looking for really tiny cracks in the fuel rods, and they're cylindrical and they're just like that, polished and shiny. And it was
Yeah.
really hard to get good lighting and not get tons of glare. And I don't think they ever actually figured it out. So yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
what that is, but
on that same line, there was another interesting problem. They had a PLC that was controlling this device that did a pressure test on these slices, I call them. And they wanted to get rid of the PLC because the guy that had originally programmed it was long gone and nobody could mess with it or it would break the whole line. So, so they wanted me to, replace the PLC, with, just as part of the assembly process. And it was just driving a digital bank, an industrial digital. I think it was maybe a Beckhoff thing or something. But so we brought somebody in that supposedly knew the ladder logic, and they went through it, tried to document what all it did and the timing and everything. The timing turned out to be the really critical thing. Um, so, I got that. I created a sequence that, duplicated what he said the ladder logic was doing. And it kind of worked, but not really. The system just wouldn't work. It would get to a certain point and just, crash out. It wasn't right. So we went back and forth with this guy several times trying to figure out where the problem was, and we just couldn't. And I was sitting there kind of, in the evening watching this thing run, trying to figure out what to do. And I realized on this bank of this, this industrial IO bank, it had a bunch of LEDs that would turn on and off as the outputs were energized and de-energized. So I had the crazy idea of filming that as it went through a sequence. I, got the camera out and filmed it, and then I went back to my hotel that night and I went through that video frame by frame, figuring out when each LED turned on and off based on, the frame rate of the camera. I modified my sequence and it worked. I modified my sequence to match the timing of the video and it worked.
Well, that reminds me, I worked on this soil sample tester, and it had some very specific timing requirements. And I was there with the scientist who designed it, the technician who ran it, and the mechanical engineer who helped build it. And all of them had different ideas on what it was supposed to do. And I looked at the software and I had another idea of what I was supposed to do. We just sat there with a stopwatch and timed it, and we were all wrong. Because it
Yeah.
was one of those things where it's like, do this for this amount of time. Some of the things were time based, and some were do it until something happens. And so it was really hard to get the exact timing down. So, and often the challenge with stuff like that is it's not documented anywhere. And then the other challenge is, and I don't know if you've encountered this, but inheriting legacy code, often they don't have a great way to test
Mm.
that the thing actually works. Do you run into
Yeah.
that?
Um, you mean test to see if
Like the
yeah,
system that
taking
like
over some code, but you don't know if the code actually works, but they want you to use it?
well, I get to this where like we have the system, it works, or it supposedly works. We want to add this feature. We have no way to test the whole system once you add this feature. Like we
Well,
can't verify that you didn't break anything else.
yeah. Yeah, that's happened a few times. Can't think of any specific instances or, the details around it, but yeah, I've run into that.
Yeah, I mean, usually my default answer is, well, let's at least like take the old machine and the new machine and put them side by side and run several things through both of them to make sure that they match. Which works if it's a non-destructive test. If it's a destructive test, then you have a whole
Yeah.
other set of issues to worry about. But so I'm curious, you mentioned like learning lessons and learning what not to do and kind of being flexible with your plans. Have you noticed a change in project management styles from when you started till now? Like that whole like going from like waterfall style to like at more agile style. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, we've gone pretty much full agile at Distech, and most of our customers have as well. Yeah, originally it was okay, we got a project, what do you need done? One guy sits down and starts working on it, start to
Mhm.
finish. And, really just freelancing it for, lack of a better term. And just keep coding until it's done and it works. But yeah, so yeah, we've gone full agile. This new project I'm just starting up, we actually give our customers access to our boards so that they can track things along with us. Um, we review that board with our customers, show them what we plan to accomplish in the next sprint, and so that way we keep in sync with them. We keep in sync with, what is their priorities, what do they need done. So it's been helpful. There's parts of it I personally don't like. I don't like the way you write a story for your tasks. I would prefer just to put in, what needs to be done, what's the requirements of this, and you could check those off. But that's just a personal thing.
Yeah. So have you run into, do you notice a lot of resistance from companies to that? Because I know you guys probably do some stuff in like more regulated industries. Or is
We've
that not
not really dove
as
into
of
any regulated industries that much. Trying to think, we did some for a medical company. Um, but yeah, and there didn't really seem to be much regulation needed for that particular project. Now that, I think there's some more, the other half of Distech does embedded programming, and I know they've gotten more into that, into some projects in that area, but I don't think our test group really has that much.
Yeah, it's very interesting at Westinghouse. There were like basically there were safety critical projects that had like all these crazy requirements, and then there were non-safety projects, and basically like it was the exact opposite on the non-safety project. Like, great, we don't have to follow this process. Let's have no process, and that didn't work quite as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes you need a little process to keep the chaos at bay, I think.
a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, so you've got involved with the community, right? Joined up with the champions, and then at some point you moved out to Colorado, right? You've been pretty active in the user group out here.
I've tried to be. I moved out here in, when was it? 2019,
Okay.
2018.
Yeah, yeah, because I've been
And
out here for a few years, but I think before you moved out here.
yeah, and so yeah, I did start going to the user group meetings up in the Golden area there. And then COVID hit and they all kind of went away for a while, and it's been real slow getting them started back up. But I think we have recently had a meeting, which I unfortunately couldn't attend. I was just too busy. But we've tried, user group meetings are seem to be really hit and miss just in general. We tried to, or we did start a user group back in Iowa,
Hmm.
and it was like the first 6 meetings were great, and we got, a lot of attendance and a lot of interest, and then it just died out. Nobody started coming, and we just couldn't get people interested in it anymore, or they were just too busy, or, I don't know the reasons, but
Yeah, it's kind of one of those like self-fulfilling things that once you have like one bad meeting, then people are like, oh, I'm not coming again. And then this keeps going down and it just kind of nosedives.
yeah,
Um,
I think being able to pull people in, good presenters, with good topics is, definitely key. And that can be a problem if you've had one going in, a particular area for a while. All the good presenters in that area are eventually, presented out. Don't have
yeah.
any more topics to cover. So it gets a little more difficult. So maybe, pulling in people that can present remotely is a good idea and will probably help. So
Yeah,
yeah, hopefully we can get that going again and get some good interest going.
yeah, I think N.A.'s trying to work on that. I think Darren definitely will give remote presentations, and he's quite
Yep.
a good presenter, and I think Norm will too. So there are definitely options out there. Uh, the other thing so yeah, our user group here kind of got killed partially by COVID and partially by the fact that we didn't have a place to meet for a while. So we used to alternate between Golden at the university, and then and I had an
Oh, they
office.
had their field office out there.
Yeah, and
Yep.
we used to alternate, and then the NI field office went away, and then our contact at the school in Golden. I think Buddy's still there,
Oh,
but yeah, that's kind of faltered a little bit. We had a few more people there. I think Les was there and some others. I don't know if Les retired or not. I can't keep track.
hmm.
That's the other problem with our library community around here. A lot of them are older, and quite a few have retired in the past couple of years. So need to try to figure out how to get some new young people in there. There's a handful. So yeah. We also you came we a group of us had a coffee thing for a while. You came to one or two of those, didn't you?
Yeah, I again,
Really
that
fun.
was before COVID. I was going to those pretty much every week. And it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit more of a drive for me. It's about an hour drive from where, Castle Rock down here where I live up to Golden.
Yeah.
So it's, as I got busier, as we got busier with projects, it was just a little harder to, take the morning off and go up there for that, even though I really want to. So hopefully I'll be able to dive back into those as well.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, we definitely, I mean, we miss having you. It's always some good conversations, always lots of good stories and reminiscing about the old days. And uh, yeah, very good stuff. The other thing you're involved in is GDevCon, right?
Yep, been involved with that, at least the North American version of it since it started.
I was gonna say, yeah, you were one of the first, you and I think like the first couple emails were like you and Dave Thompson and a few others, I think, right?
Sounds right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you're in charge of sponsorships, right?
I am in charge of sponsorships,
Yeah. So if
and I
anybody
think we're
wants,
still looking for sponsors.
yeah, I was gonna say if anybody wants to give us money, you should talk to Ed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah, sponsorships, you get a couple packages, but basically you get your name out there, and maybe if you give us enough money, you get a little bit of time on stage to talk about whatever you want. And
little time on stage, some passes to the conference. And
yep, yeah. And we also last year we did booths, and they turned out pretty
we
good. We
did
had some vendor booths, and we've got a
some
couple
vendor
this year
booths.
too, right?
Yeah, we do have a few vendor booths, although I think they all might be spoken for at this point.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
yeah, and this is going to be our last year. Well, at least next year it won't be in Colorado. I won't say this is our last year in Colorado because it might come back here, but
Yeah, no,
next
it's not gonna be
year,
Golden next year. Yeah.
yep, next year it will be somewhere else, which I don't think we're allowed to announce where it's going to be yet, but
Yeah, I've been
you'll have to
asked a
be
lot
at the
lately. So
conference.
yeah, you gotta come to the conference to find out if you want to be the first one to know.
Yep.
But yeah, it'll be. I don't know. I definitely voted to try to keep it here, but I did not. I got outvoted.
Yeah, me
Sometimes I
too.
think life would be better if I'm a dictator, but I'm not. So I only have. They only call me president, not dictator. So
We are just about a month away from GDevCon N.A. Tickets and sponsorships are still available for a few more weeks. This year, we have David Neal giving a pre conference workshop on leadership for the reluctant leader, and the DQMH Consortium hosting DQMH Day the day after the conference. Get your tickets while they're hot. We look forward to seeing you there.
yeah, cool. So we talked about project management changing over the course of stuff. What have changes have you seen in the community since we've been talking about community-based stuff?
Um, that one's a little more difficult for me. Early on, I was really involved in the community as I was learning, but I haven't been as much involved in it lately. And just, I don't know if it's time or just maybe it's just me not being as interested anymore, or just, like I say, not needing it as much anymore. But NI Week was always fun. To me, that was always a nice community event where you could go and get together, with all your community online friends
Hmm.
that you rarely ever see but talk to all the time online.
So were you really into lava and the lava barbecue and all of that? Were you in that part of that scene, or is that kind of its own separate thing?
I always went to the lava barbecue, and I always thought that was a lot of fun. That was always a good time, good place to sit down and talk with people. Just again, Distech would always try and put up a nice door prize for the lava barbecue, generate a little more interest in, just people going to it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the first couple of years I went, I don't know why, but I thought it was this like exclusive thing or something, and I did not go. I missed out. It was quite a fun time. I don't know if
Yeah,
they'll bring that back or not. Apparently this year may be one of the last NI Connect events or something for a little while. Apparently something about they are tearing down the convention center in Austin.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think NI Connect is actually like the last event that they're having. Like as soon as we all clear out, they're like slated to start tearing it down or something.
Wow.
So yeah, that'll be interesting. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see what
Do you know what they're
happens.
going to put up in its place? I haven't heard that.
I don't know. I would imagine they just put up another convention center, but I don't know.
Hmm. Seems like a waste, but okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have any problems with the convention center, but I mean, it was always confusing to try to find stuff at the convention center. That was always a problem because it had all these like
Yeah.
mezzanines and like which floor do you have to be on to get to this room or that room, and it was never immediately obvious to me.
Yeah. That's the layout of it could be a little confusing, but
Yeah,
kind of learn your way around after a while.
yeah. Were you big into the speaking of community stuff? Were you big into the CLA summits when they were around?
Yeah, I did go to several of them. I actually went to the very first one and presented at that one.
Wow.
So yeah, and went to I can't remember how many I went to, several of them though.
Yeah,
And those are always a lot of fun. I actually like that better than NI week just because the sessions were, much more technical based, and as NI week, you can get into some that are much more sales based or management based. And
I was gonna say, yeah, the presentation quality at the earlier NI weeks that I went to was not all that great. There were a lot of sales and marketing stuff and a lot of like
you
partners
know,
pitching their things, and like just the way they were pitched was not really all that interesting, some of them. Uh, and there were like
they
a handful. I would go into somewhere with some guy like basically reading his PhD thesis or something, and that was always never really that interesting either.
yeah, they did improve that eventually, and they had, some advanced tracks
Hmm.
that you could go into, and you'd follow this, and it would be, much more technical rather than salesy.
Yeah, when they started I think they called it the Champions track, and that
The
definitely,
champions track, yeah.
towards the end, that definitely got better. Yeah, I think there's continuing that this year at NI Connect, although it's not quite the same, but there are some technical presentations. So, I mean, yeah, I think the change from going from NI Connect, NI Week, and the CLA Summit and going to the GDevCons, I mean, I do miss the CLA summits, but at the same time, I do think there's some value in us as a community taking charge of things. I mean, the CLA summit, we kind of had free reign to present on what we wanted, but there's still like, there's heavy NI presence and heavy kind of NI hand in like who got selected to speak and like what the topics were, and they definitely set an agenda. And I mean,
Yeah.
in some ways, rightfully so, right? They're paying for it, and it was a free conference, so
Yeah.
yeah, he who has the money makes the rules. That's fine. But you know, it's good for us to have some of our own things. I feel like as a community, maybe we relied a little too heavily on NI for some things.
Yeah, it could
So,
be.
but
Yeah, so I think GDevCon really kind of gets around that.
yeah, I definitely do miss the festive atmosphere around NI week. I remember like the first one I went to was in 2009, I think. And it was definitely very festive. I mean, you walked into any bar on 6th Street and you told me you were at Thin Eye and there were already tabs open, and it was just like it was a lot of debauchery. And I remember like I went with my local sales rep back when we had them, and I
Yeah.
don't know who carried who home at 4 a.m. in the morning, but I
Yeah, yeah. Some of those early NI weeks had some really late nights.
Yeah, I do remember getting a call at 6 a.m. though from him when he was asking me where his laptop bag was and if I'd seen it. So that was not, I don't think he had a fun time the rest of that trip. He had left it at a bar somewhere. So the other
Yeah,
interesting
and
thing, oh yeah.
the the conference parties they had, they always had a live band playing and some pretty good food. That
Yeah,
always
it
that
kept
always that was
Austin.
that was a good evening.
Yeah, I think they still do those. The one year I went to, I don't know, was last year the National Speedway one? I don't remember. And they've had some
Hmm.
good presenters on the keynotes. I remember seeing the astronaut guy, what's his name, Scott Kelly. That was a good one.
Yep.
I don't remember too many of the other keynotes. I don't know. I'm not into getting up early to go see those usually because like sometimes they have good speakers, but sometimes it's just like a bunch of NI marketing stuff, and I'm like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, early on in the first few NI weeks I went to, the keynotes were really good. They had, they were demonstrating a lot of new hardware and how people are using it. And, they were really well done. And yeah, then eventually they kind of went away from the demonstrations and a lot more talk. But yeah, the keynote speakers were usually pretty good.
I remember seeing Specialized Bikes there one year, and they had a bike
Yeah.
wind tunnel, and I thought that was a pretty good presentation. I thought that was like a cool application of LabVIEW that I probably wouldn't have thought of. So,
Yeah, the one that stands out to me was when they were demonstrating I think it's called the stop saw, and it's a
okay, I
table
think
saw.
yeah,
A table saw where if it detects a finger on the blade, it throws this break into the blade and pulls it down into the table.
yeah.
And apparently they prototyped that with a compact Rio.
Wow, that's cool.
So, and they demonstrated that on stage and how it worked. And
Cool. So have you seen a lot of that of companies like prototyping stuff with compact Rios and then switching to some other FPGA thing to better
Not
performance or like cheaper
not
cost?
personally in any of the projects I've done. I've worked with Compact Rio a lot and still am. But it's always as, part of the, test system, not as a prototyping thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but since I left Westinghouse, I haven't really done much with compact trio. I think part of it is just like the cost being on my own, being a
Mm,
solo person, buying a bunch of compact Rios just to have them sitting around is not cost effective.
yeah.
And like the projects that I get pulled in on just don't need that real-time performance. So, but
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a lot of times, one of the customers I'm working with, they went with Compact Rios not because they needed real time, but because they needed their IT department to keep their fingers out of their test systems.
ah, yeah, I've seen that. I've also seen just to like have something really rugged or like, you're putting it at the like at some really remote location or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you like yeah, if you don't need the channel count of like a PXI system or something, that's it's a good solution. Yeah, for my part, I just always viewed it as like you're adding extra complexity if you don't need it. Like, writing software in Windows is easy. Writing it in RT, like it's a different paradigm, and then FPGA is a whole other different paradigm. And so it's like you've got all
yeah,
these
and
layers and yeah.
yeah, and a lot of that has actually gone away. Because the newer Compact Rios support DAC-MX and XNet, and
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
really awesome. That definitely was a game changer when I saw that. I was like, oh,
yeah,
yeah, now I can do all kinds of cool stuff.
yeah, it's actually been a while since I've written any FPGA code because of that.
Yeah, well, apparently, so in talking to Terry, I've learned there's a big difference between writing FPGA code for compact Rios, where you're just kind of like gluing stuff together on the backplane and maybe doing a little bit of signal processing, versus using like the R series cards or like the big PXI cards,
Hmm.
where you're like really doing a lot of number crunching and processing and
Yeah.
yeah.
For that precise timing like we needed for that big laser system.
Yeah, I took a LabVIEW FPGA class in like 2007, and then I never really found a project that needed it, so I haven't touched it since then. So I'm not the best person to ask about those things. Usually I just refer them somewhere else when people ask me about that.
Yeah, I did one for an FPGA project that was to simulate digital signals. And they wanted to be, it was a company that makes meters, flow meter type things. And so they wanted to be able to simulate the signals from these meters that go into their controllers.
Hmm.
And so they wanted good signals, they wanted bad signals. So they wanted to be able to, tweak the signal during the test so that it, isn't quite right. It's a little out of phase.
Cause it to
The
fail.
pulses aren't quite long enough. It's they're out, it skips a pulse. It has too many, just all sorts of different things. And using the FPGA, that was, not easy, but much easier than it would have been trying to do it, just using DAC, DAC MX.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, that's like basic like hardware in the loop type testing then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a huge explosion in that lately. I mean, Veristand, I guess. Have you used that? That's like basically all about hardware in the loop type
Yeah,
stuff,
I've
right?
used it a little bit. Some of the other guys that are at Distech have used it quite a bit. I'll probably be learning more about it over the next 6 months here because my new project is going to be Veristand based.
Ah, yeah, I did one hardware in the loop project, but they didn't use NI stuff. They had something that ran MATLAB code, and I forget what it was.
Hmm.
It was something
Oh,
DSpace, maybe.
yeah, DSpace.
Yeah, I think that's what they were using.
That's another big company, yeah, in the Hill arena.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't really touch that side. I worked on the other side of the thing that was using the simulated thing. So, but yeah, it definitely this was for Ben up in Emerson up what Micromotion, right? They make the flow meters. And I guess their big thing was, they had these transceivers, right? That took the signals from the flow meter and turned it into like Profibus or Profinet or whatever they were using.
Hmm.
And they wanted to test them. And in theory, the transmitter should work with any size flow meter. But to test it with 5 different size flow meters, they had to like hook up all these flow meters and like their test setup, like it was a big deal to like redo all the piping and plumbing and everything. So they could just suck it up to this box and it simulate all the signals and Went from 6 days to test a variety of combinations to 6 minutes or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a really useful. I know I was talking to somebody yesterday from Pickering, and they were talking about how they're trying to get into that space and do some stuff, and they were talking about some of the mil-aero applications. So yeah, good, useful stuff. All right, do you have any last minute thoughts to wrap things up? Anything we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
Uh, can't really think of anything.
No, no good stories.
No more good stories. No. My
Okay.
my my vid my videotape of the digital block to replace the PLC is my best one, I think.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's clever, and it's worth, yeah.
Yeah.
Take
Sometimes you
advantage of
gotta,
what debugging signals you have.
yeah.
No one would like that. That was designed for debug, right? I don't know if the person who designed that thought that you would actually ever do that, but
It
it's,
worked. That's all
yeah,
I cared.
no. So,
Made the customer happy.
yeah, there is something to be said for what works. I mean, look, like I said, literally, I was there with the stopwatch, so
Yeah.
same idea. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Ed.
Yep, thank you. Hope to see everybody at GDevCon this year.
Yep.
One last year in beautiful Colorado.
All right. Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabuexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.